Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode 39 in the Craft Fair booth review series where I take a look at a real craft fair booth submitted by one of my channel subscribers, and I'll point out things that the vendor is doing well and should continue to do, and then also offer up some ideas where there's room for improvement. During the review, keep your craft fair booth in mind so that you can apply these tips in order to take your setup to the next level. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, and so for today's booth review, we're going to be taking a look at Mika's booth, and the business name is Green Harvest Homestead, and she makes tallow-based skincare products, and based out of Central Alabama. So again, Alabama, a state we have not covered in the booth review series, so we're checking them off left and right. Very cool. The most common booth configuration that Mika uses is a 6-foot main table, then a 4-foot table on one side, and a checkout area on the other side of the main table. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And I'm going to show you our first peek of the booth right here. During today's review, I'll address a few questions that Mika had for me that I think is also going to benefit pretty much all viewers, all vendors. So I want to include that as part of the review today, some questions that Mika had, and I'll kind of just give you guys a heads up when the questions come. But what I find fascinating about this setup is that this business was first established in August of 2024, with its first ever event taking place in October of 2024. So at the time of this recording, this business is brand new, and I mean brand new. Yet this setup is already incredibly advanced in a lot of ways. So let's go ahead and break this down into some detail. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is displays. Now, you've chosen to go with a combination of wooden crates and trays. The wood is left its natural color, it's not stained, and it happens to be very light in color and shows well against the black supporting elements of the booth. And also the products themselves have black casings and boxes, so you can see that here, the nice contrast. The displays are various sizes which serve different purposes based on the product it's showcasing. So, for example, the big wooden crates display the largest items such as your gift boxes, which are propped open so that the customer can easily see what's all included in the gift set. Smart move there. I like the fact that those are propped open. Then if we zoom in a little bit here and we take a look at these wooden trays set down on the table, those are holding the lip balms. And within those trays are sections containing different types of lip balms, such as apple, vanilla, brown sugar, and more. Here's another angle of that in action right here. So with all that being said, think about how intentional this was on Mika's part. Picking out displays that truly fit the item being showcased. It seems like a simple concept, but it's a concept that many vendors overlook. Some vendors will fall in love with a certain kind of display and try to use it throughout their entire booth as sort of like a one-size-fits-all solution. Yet, a lot of the times, that might not be the best option. So when you select your displays, just be sure that you are keeping specific items in your booth in mind in order to keep your setup looking purposeful and tidy. So while we're looking at this view right here, I'd also like to give the tiered trays a shout out. I really like these because they offer some height at the booth, but more importantly, they serve as a great visual breakup from the wooden crates. So if we back out a little bit again, we see again multiple wooden crates throughout the booth, and these right here do a good job of sort of breaking up that pattern. If you try to imagine a booth as nothing but wooden crates, that would get a little bit old and repetitive visually. So these displays are essential in offering that visual variety every setup needs in order to avoid too much repetition. The black metal is also a nice tie-in with the other black elements at the booth. Really, lots of reasons to like these tiered trays. So now I'm going to go ahead and dive into our first question that Mika had, and it's, should I keep the crates or go with a multi-level tiered stand? And really, I like your current displays a lot, again, particularly with how you kept your products in mind. Honestly, I wouldn't change anything with how you're filling your booth in with displays with this current size and layout. Now, if you need to condense a little bit in order to fit into a smaller booth, let's say you sign up for a different show that doesn't have quite as much space, then you can do some things to save space, such as a tiered display for the lip balms instead of the current one that takes up a sizable amount of space on your table. Okay, so you could kind of do something that's vertical for your lip balms rather than something horizontal that eats up a lot of that table space. So keep that in mind as your booth size might fluctuate from show to show. There's things that you guys can do with displays in order to save space, but yet still present the same amount of product that you would at a bigger booth. But yeah, as we kind of take a look at some different angles of the booth here, I really like displays. I think this is one of your stronger suits at your booth. And again, especially for a business that's really just getting started, really good thought process here with how you're tying it into your products, the way that you're using multiple tiers and kind of stacking your displays like we see right here. So there's a lot of good happening here with your displays. Not a whole lot that I can honestly critique you on. All right, so let's dive into pricing, and I'm going to dive right into the second question that Mika had, and it's, should the product pricing signage be bigger? And do I have any kind of tips on Mika's pricing signage? So from what I can tell, you're utilizing two different pricing methods. You have a large priced list sign, like you can see up here, that covers all products at the booth. And then you also have zone pricing, where a small sign will address the pricing of each zone of products throughout your booth. So whether or not you have your items individually marked as well, I can't really tell. But honestly, you really don't need to, since you have the other two methods present at the booth and they're both being executed at a high level. Now, on a side note here, the only reason I'd advise you to consider this, just keep in mind, is that you have the type of products and level of organization at your booth that would benefit greatly from having UPC or barcodes to keep inventory, tracking, and management crystal clear. This is definitely an advanced stage approach for most vendors, so don't feel like you got to jump into this right away. But keep in mind down the road. This way, after an event, you can just open the app that you use for your inventory and sales management, and it's all laid out in front of you. What sold well, what didn't, etc. And, it's definitely not one of those things that's necessary this early on into your vendor journey, but I would consider researching barcode POS systems to begin exploring the possibilities that this strategy could have for your business. And again, this recommendation comes because I can tell that you're the type of vendor who is hungry to improve and to take this setup to elite levels, even early on in your vendor journey. But as for your current pricing signs, I do like this large sign because they have an attractive design. The layout is easy to understand, you've got your business name on there, and you even let the shoppers know that tax is not included in the prices. That part was included on one of these signs. So we're looking at the sign that it has this plus tax on right here. Now there is another sign in a different part of the booth where it doesn't have this. So I would go ahead and just put it on either all of the signs or none of them. Okay, so pretty much just to kind of have consistency throughout the booth. And again, on another little bit of a side note, adding sales tax to your goods at craft fair is something that all vendors should research no matter where you are, because laws and regulations on this matter vary based on location. So just protect yourself and always make sure that you're going about things the right way. Obviously, I'm not saying that Mika here is not doing the right thing, because honestly, I really have no idea what the correct procedure is in Alabama. But as we come back over here and look at your zone pricing signs, I would get yourself a green marker and use that for your pricing signs instead of the white. This way, all of the pricing signs stand out a little bit more by being a different color than your product description signs, but the green will also lean into your business name. And green, is kind of representative in our minds, at least, as being associated with money. So there's a lot of tie-ins there with why green might make sense as a nice tie-in with your pricing signs. All right, let's go ahead and dive into signage. So the main piece of signage that we're going to discuss in this segment is the laminated set of signs throughout the booth that ask, "What is tallow?" at the top. These kind of signs are great to have at the booth, particularly when paired up with these types of products, skincare products, even food vendors. Honestly, a lot of different types of vendors could benefit from having product information signage. Now, when we look at these signs in particular, I like that you start them off with a question. It immediately makes you want to read further to discover what the answer is. However, I would try and challenge you to reduce the amount of total text that you've got on this sign by about 50%. Currently, there's quite a bit of information there, and while that's good in theory, it would require someone to invest a pretty substantial amount of time and commitment in order to stop walking through a craft fair and read everything you've got on there. Try and make what you have written more concise and hit them with the absolute most important tidbits and facts. If you're at all familiar with ChatGPT or AI assistant apps, you can type in your current signs information and ask AI to make it more condensed and concise. A free way, honestly, to access this is through Facebook Messenger. You should see a Meta AI option on there that you can use, but honestly, there's many ways that you can access AI assistance. Sometimes if I need help with phrasing something the right way or condensing text, this can be a great tool to use to kind of help me phrase it in a way that's, professional and something I really couldn't just come up with off the top of my head. Another type of sign that's at your booth is your product description signs. Some examples of this are the sign that says holiday scents right here, along with the signs that say tallow and natural products over on this part of the booth. Now, these types of signs I would actually keep as is in the white writing, because by switching your pricing to green, it will help visitors to quickly differentiate between the two types of signs, and it'll just make things a little bit more clear at the booth. If there's only one size of sign and it's written in the same color, there's a lot less distinction in between the types of signs rather than if one sign was written in a second color. So that makes it kind of nice for the customers to be able to quickly identify the type of sign that they might be looking for. So now let's take a look at the section of the booth here that features the checkout area. There's quite a bit of signage in this area, so let's break this down one by one. On top, we see a green sign that provides shoppers with QR codes in order to pay you via Venmo or Cash App. This sign is laid out well, and I like that you've incorporated your branding into it while maintaining a clean and organized layout of the sign. Underneath that, we have a white sign that has your business name and says pay here. Now this sign, I don't know if it's really necessary to have at the booth unless you're finding people are sort of confused on where to check out. Your checkout stand as a whole is very well put together though, and I think it should be obvious to most people on where they should go when they're getting ready to make a purchase. However, if you are finding that this isn't the case, then you can definitely stick with it to have this sign in order to help some people out. Then underneath that, we have the sign that reads, "Thank you for shopping local." It's never a bad idea to put these things into your booth. It's truly the beauty of a craft fair to be able to shop and support local individuals and businesses within your community. This sign looks nice, and I think it's a great location of your booth to have this posted. So that's kind of important too. I think this is a really good spot for it where it's not going to be distracting to the displays and the products and all that. And I think that this location makes a lot of sense. And finally, to the left of that, we have what looks to be a pricing list sign. Now, obviously, great job posting this here. Always just make sure that your prices match on the big sign compared to what you have posted throughout the booth. And I'm not saying that, they don't, but this is just kind of another side note to keep in mind, vendors, that there's a lot of reasons why your pricing signs on your menu style board and your individual signs might not match. Maybe you have a sale at a craft fair and you already have these big ones printed out that you kind of just use from show to show, but you've forgotten that you've had a sale or you're going to have a sale at a specific show. Maybe your pricing is just kind of fluctuating, like you have a new product that you're rolling out that you're not really quite sure where the pricing should be on it yet, and you're sort of trying to figure it out based on sales. So there's really a lot of different reasons why your pricing might move around, and you just want to make sure that all of your pricing signage, no matter what kind it is, matches throughout your booth. So again, just one of those little side notes to keep in mind for all vendors. So when we consider your signage at the booth as a whole, I might challenge you to start getting things looking a little bit more unified throughout the whole booth. Some of the signage is black, some of the signage is white, some of the signage is green. This can be an opportunity for you to really take the booth to the next level in order to get all of the signage just looking really cohesive and branded. And since we're looking at this view right here, I want to make another quick little detour, little quick side note, and say that I really like that you have your signboards two-sided, so we can see that right up here. I don't know if you just, slid 2 sheets of paper into the sign holder, the sign stand, one facing outwards, one facing inwards, or if you just printed two-sided. But either way, I like that you've done this because if you happen to forget a price, you can quickly check the sheet on your end without making things awkward and spinning your signage around, or, kind of having to look over and lean over your booth just to figure out what something costs. So this is just another one of those really small details that can go a long way into making you comfortable throughout the show and just taking your professionalism as a vendor to the next level. All right, so now let's roll into marketing, and we're going to start by talking about the business cards. I like that you've got them located in multiple spots throughout your booth. The card holders themselves are also very nice, very subdued, and they don't take any attention away from what's happening at the booth. I enjoy the acrylic card holders in that you can see through them, and it allows you to observe the entire front side of a business card. This, might be one of those personal preference things, but it's just something that I enjoy because you're able to see the entire design of the card. So the cards are two-sided with the front side covering the basics, and the back side, we can't see it, but I would assume that you've got your contact info on there, maybe a QR code. They're white with a deep green color, and we'll talk about color more in depth later on in the review. But overall, nice job with the cards, establishing that branding we see in other spots around the booth. So like the business cards, your products themselves are also heavily branded. They feature the same white background with a very dark green lettering and logos. Mika also has a table runner at the booth that shows off the business logo front and center. The logo is big and is well positioned on the runner. Now, I'm not quite sure what type of material the runner is. Perhaps it's a vinyl banner, but it does have quite a bit of a wavy look to it, like it might have been rolled up when it was in storage, but then it, maybe got squished or got flattened or something happened to it there where you can see all these waves in it. Just make sure that you're storing your banners and runners in shipping cylinders, or some people call them mailing tubes. These will protect your runners and your banners, extending the life of them while also making sure that they look good. So this is a really, really inexpensive purchase that you can make for your business that's going to help to kind of keep things looking great and then also extend the life of your items as well. All right, now we're going to zoom way in here and take a closer look at this newsletter sign-up sheet. It's always a great idea to have one of these posted someplace at the booth. Right now, the sheet is pretty basic, but this is one of those elements of the booth that I don't really think needs to be extravagant. I do like that on the bottom, you've got a little bit of a consent statement. It reads, "Join our mailing list. Sign up to receive special offers." There's a lot of terms for this section of an email sign-up sheet. Some people call it a consent statement, but you also might know it as an email disclosure or disclaimer. Basically, you're just informing the individual how their personal information will be used. Now, it's really important to include this statement somewhere on your sign-up sheets if you want to have a professional presentation at your booth. I think what you have right now is good enough to get the point across, but if you or any vendors watching this are looking for an example of a longer disclosure, then you could say something like, "By signing up for my newsletter, you agree to receive periodic emails from me regarding my products, promotions, and events. Your information will be kept confidential and will not be shared by third parties. You can unsubscribe at any time. Thank you for your support." And then I would even consider typing my name on there afterwards to make it a little bit more personable and to help establish that trust. But yeah, during this booth review, honestly, I'm trying just to find any type of ways to improve the booth. So I'm being a little bit nitpicky in this review. Mika, you already have a good booth. So really it's down to identifying whatever ways possible to improve. And I think that the email sign-up sheet could use a little love. Be sure to incorporate consistent branding as well. Roll the same fonts over that you have on your business cards and the table runner to the newsletter sign-up sheet, and that will also take it to the next level. So let's back out and again take a look at the entire booth as a whole, because we're going to go ahead and talk about a vertical space. And this is an absolutely terrific element of your booth. as you view the booth from different angles, there are several height variations, and you've made great use of your product displays in order to create interesting viewpoints from the shopper's perspective. I can also appreciate the fact that you have carved out multiple openings in the verticality so that you can be seen and accessed in order to communicate effectively with the visitors at your booth. Now, this is something that we haven't really talked about much on the channel before, but I like the fact that your highest points at the booth aren't always the same thing. Vendors, this is another way to keep things interesting and fresh at a market booth. So for example, if we take a look at a few different angles here, sometimes signage is the highest part of one section of the booth, while in another area, it's the gift sets with the tops of the boxes being pulled open. Now, this is truly elite level use of vertical space. There's really nothing that I can think of to criticize because this is definitely one of my favorite elements of your booth. So well done here, Mika. All right, so now we're going to dive into colors, contrast, and texture. Now, let's discuss colors first. If we take a step back and look at the booth as a whole, I think most of us are going to see three colors: black, white, and wood grain. So you're not the first vendor in the booth review series to have a color as part of their business name. Again, the business name Green Harvest Homestead. And for those of us who visit craft fairs pretty often, it's definitely not uncommon to find vendors who use a color as part of their business name. And whenever I see this, something in me wants to see that color present at the booth with a fair amount of abundance. Now, there is some green present, but it's very dark. It's on the labels and the logo, but it almost looks black in a lot of places. And, while that's fine, and I'm not suggesting that you change your business colors, I just would think that it might be nice to introduce some splashes of green so that it's a bit more visible at your booth. So one of the things that you could do is almost like a thin table runner that runs lengthwise on your table. I would basically put it over the black tablecloth, but underneath your table runner so that it kind of runs like, here there is a little bit of a stripe, and then here is a little bit of a green stripe. And then, maybe you could have it like pulled down, or you could trim it and hem it so it is just basically the length of your table, or you could have it run down. That's fine too. But I would make it a thin table runner, like no wider than a sheet of paper, so that most of the table top is still black. Just, again, really subtle splashes of green. Maybe you could kind of have some fun with your wooden crates, and you could get a bed of fake grass and put that on the bottom of the inside of your wooden crates. This will not only make sense with the color portion of your business name, but also push the homestead portion of your business's branding as well. Now, introducing some more green is one of those things that you don't have to go absolutely wild on, but just some splashes here and there would really go a long way in developing more personality at the booth and tying it into your business's branding. Now, for contrast, all I can really say is that you're doing a great job. All throughout the booth, you see the light on dark and the dark on light. From the products to the wooden crates to the tablecloth against the table runner, it's all very high contrast. And in the few places where there's low contrast, I think things still work out well for you. An example of this right here is the lip balms and the wooden trays that they sit in. So in this angle, there's not really an extreme amount of contrast, but it still looks attractive. Has a very neat and clean look to it. And finally, when it comes to texture, there's not a whole lot of it at the booth. The obvious source of texture here comes from the wood grain, which again ties into the business name and branding nicely, as it just reinforces the homey, down-to-earth vibe that's happening at the booth. Now, if you decide to add the bed of grass, that will add an excellent source of texture and make sense for your business without going overboard with it to the point that it begins to take away some of the thunder from your setup. Okay, so let's chat a little bit about strength of theme. So strength of theme, I think, is a really strong element of your booth. You have a wide variety of skincare products, and you do a great job of displaying them and categorizing them into zones that make sense. Now, I do have a minor suggestion to consider when it comes to your what is tallow signs now that we've reached this portion of the booth review. It might be kind of nice to put a second line of text underneath what is tallow that reads, "And how can it improve your skincare?" or something along those lines. I know that you've got the word skincare on your table runner, and just based on your products, people can understand that this is a skincare booth. But the current header, "What is tallow?" I think it could be even more powerful. I mean, hell, maybe even go all in and just make the header, "What is tallow and why it needs to be part of your skincare routine?" or something of that nature. I think consider phrasing it in a way where it absolutely commands the attention of a visitor. But as we pull it back here again and take a look at the booth as a whole, I'm comfortable with saying that strength of theme is one of your stronger categories in this booth review. You've got a great grasp on the vision for your business and honestly for the booth itself. So again, great job, Mika. All right, now let's talk about accessibility. So the booth is a walk around setup rather than a walk in design. Really, unless you have a lot of space to work with, I mean, really like a bare minimum of 10 feet by 10 feet, then a walk around type of booth is the best choice. It puts you, the vendor, right in the middle so that you're accessible from multiple angles. From these photos, it appears that your booth was exposed to 2 aisles of foot traffic, one on this side and then one over here. That's kind of what I'm grasping from the photo. Now, one thing I noticed is that the aisles in some of these pictures seem incredibly tiny. And of course, that would be an organizer problem, not a vendor problem. But if we take a look at where Mika's checkout stand is, it appears that the space between your booth and the purple booth next door is squeezed into a narrow gap. I could see this getting potentially pretty congested. So again, over here, if we kind of zoom in a little bit, here's the checkout stand. Okay, so Mika would be standing here, looking kind of where this lady in the blue is. And then there's a gap between these 2 tables. So I assume that this is where the visitor was supposed to be during checkout. And this just seems awfully tight. I don't know, maybe it's just the angle of the booths or something, but that's just kind of one thing to consider when you're having a checkout stand is that you really got to have the space for it. Okay, so that's just the one thing I want to bring up for accessibility is that if you're going to dedicate space to a checkout area, it needs to be somewhat open, where people can still walk through or pass by. That's just one of those things to keep in mind with the placement of your booth within a hall, how the organizer has it laid out, and then how that can affect the way that you're going to set your booth up. Otherwise, for accessibility, I don't really have any kind of concerns with the booth. We see the table cloths and the table runner are at a perfect length. There's no tripping hazards or anything like that. When you have a walk around booth, it makes accessibility a lot easier because you're not inviting people like into your space, inside of your space. So there's kind of a lot less to worry about with, maybe some stands sticking out or things like that. So I don't really have any kind of concerns with the booth. It looks like you're able to get in and out of your booth easily as the vendor. If you need to set out more products or take a step back to make sure things are looking good from the visitor's perspective. And, speaking of tidiness, things are looking pretty good. There's a couple of spots that I see on top of the tablecloth where maybe a lint roller would help you out. Just with those black tablecloths, everything shows up, They're great for scuffs, like long-term black tablecloths. They're great for maintaining their age and their look as time goes on. So that part of it is good. But then for things like lint or just the various, little white fuzzies or whatever you want to call them that we see on tablecloths, just make sure to have a lint roller packed in your bag, and that can kind of help with some of that we see throughout the booth. All right, so now let's roll into general use of space. And I think with the size of this booth at an indoor show, you're doing a lot really well. While we're looking at this view, let's take a look at the checkout area that you have set up for yourself. And it's fantastic. I mean, you've got your bags underneath. You have your cash box hidden behind the wooden crate, which is, if you're going to roll with a cash box and not an apron, this is the way that you want to do it. You want to have it pulled back behind that crate so that it's pretty much impossible for somebody to, reach over or do something sketchy. If you're kind of looking the other way, it would be incredibly difficult. But this is really, really well done. Very professional setup here for your checkout stand. Again, you guys, this booth, like at the time that these pictures were taken, this booth was months old. The entire business was just months old. Okay. So really, really nicely done here. So I just want to give you kudos on that for your general use of space, that you really can't do too much better than this when it comes to a checkout area. Now, if we come back over here, one thing I want to make note of is that we can probably reduce the number of the what is Talos signs by one. I would take one away because I see 3 at the booth. Really, there's 2 kind of set up side by side here. And it's just, I don't want to say redundant, you know what I mean? But visual space that visitors can absorb, it's so precious. It's one of the most precious things at a craft fair booth is just, when people look at a booth, they're kind of glancing, okay? They're walking through a show and they're going to be sort of darting their eyes from booth to booth, and you have mere seconds to make an impression on a visitor. And really the only things that you want to set up at your booth are the absolute essential things, unless you're, kind of adding some little decorative pieces to make it festive. Maybe around the holidays, a lot of vendors will do this. But again, you just want to keep the essentials out there. So I would take one of these signs away so that there's just a little bit more focus on the products and not just boom sign, boom sign, boom sign. So that's just one thing to consider, is just maybe pull it back by one and have 2 of them out there. But I mean, again, you're making really good use of your space here. I like how you've gone up vertical in pretty much every element of the booth. There's a lot of vertical space being used. There's a lot of the out front space being used, so that's good too. This is a pretty good spot for your email sign-up sheet. You got your business cards sprinkled throughout. Things are just, what I would say for this booth is that things are just looking balanced. There's a really balanced feel when I look at this booth, and I can really appreciate that from the shopper's perspective. But again, as your booth sizes fluctuate, because I know that's one of the things that you mentioned in your email, is that you kind of go with different shows that have different sizes of booth. Just keep your displays in mind and how you're using them. If you scale down to a booth that's smaller, obviously that space that you have, that real estate, becomes more and more valuable when you have less of it. So you kind of have to make those choices that might be difficult, where you have a lot of each type of product right now at your booth. Well, as the booth shrinks down, you pretty much have to make choices on, do I show the same amount of variety of products and maybe just have fewer of each item within each category out there? Or do I actually cut some of my worst sellers out of my presentation entirely? But then the fun part comes when you scale up and you get a big booth and you can have tons of freedom. So yeah, the setup of a craft fair booth being determined by the space it has, that's a real issue that a lot of vendors have, and there's a lot of choices that you have to make as part of that. One of the examples that we talked about early in the review was the lip balm holders out here. They take up quite a bit of real estate at this booth, but you've got it to work with, so that's perfectly fine, and it looks really fantastic the way that you have it here. But say you were at an event with just one table, well, then I probably suggest that you get something that is vertically stacked and kind of narrow, so that you save that table space, but you're able to still display quite a bit of these out there. And now finally, let's roll into the eye test. And the eye test is very good at the booth. If you're interested in skincare, you're going to be checking this booth out. I have no doubts about that. I like that the table runner has the logo big and bold, and that you've included skincare products on the table runner. I always like when businesses include kind of the genre of crafts or works that are going to be featured at the booth. There's nothing wrong with reinforcing what's happening at your booth. We talked about the high contrast. I think that helps pull people into a booth when it's kind of eye-catching and there's a lot of distinction between light colors and dark colors. I think that will help to pull people in. The booth in general, though, looks very clean. It looks well organized. You can tell that you put a lot of care and thought into how you want your products to look. It looks honestly like a storefront would. Like if you went into like a boutique shop, a boutique store, independent store in a small town, to me it has that cozy, warm look to it that you'd see in a place like that. And I really think that goes a long way in a craft fair environment. I think a lot of people can appreciate that kind of vibe and that kind of look from a booth. And before I wrap things up, I want to address another question that Mika had, and it's going to be in regards to couple of items that we haven't yet touched on, and that's the sample sticks and the lip balm wands that we see over here. So Mika, I didn't write this question down word for word, but it was sort of like, should she have these out, and are these a good look to have at the booth? And I think they definitely are. I think that it's nice to be able to offer samples to people. Of course, you have to factor that into sort of like your inventory, your overhead that you're absorbing is the cost of having samples at the booth. But if you don't have any kind of issues with that, if you're seeing a payoff with that, or if you're fine with even just a little bit of a loss on offering samples, it can be a nice thing, nice gesture to have at your booth to say, hey, I stand by my product and I'm willing to have you try it right here and right now, instead of just forcing you to blindly buy something. You know what I mean? So I think just that gesture in and of itself really establishes trust in you as a vendor. And even when I think about it from an organizer's perspective, again, guys, I organized craft fairs for 10 years. This is something that I really like to see in vendors if I'm an event organizer, because again, you stand by your products, you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, and give people that chance to really experience your products before they make a purchase. Now, again, this is one of those things that's not very fun that I have to circle back to, but whenever it comes to samples of any kind, now there's a little bit of a distinction between ingested items and items that are not ingested, but you should definitely research this for all vendors that offer samples of products at their booth. Always research this wherever you are in your local town, community, state, country, whatever, and just make sure that you're doing things the right way, because every location treats these things differently. It would be nice if there was some sort of universal way of doing this so that everybody just kind of knew and it was easy, but it's unfortunately not. And again, just as a vendor, just make sure that you're doing this the right way. Again, no idea what goes on in Alabama for Mika's booth, but it's just one of those things to keep in mind as you sort of scale up the professionalism as a vendor. And when you start to apply for really premier events, juried events, big time, high profile craft fairs and artisan fairs, these are the kind of things that you want to look out for, because they all, once they get to that level of a premier show, things start to get really formal. The organizers really want all vendors to have their stuff together, you know what I mean? To be very well prepared and have everything checked out. So again, just one of those side notes I wanted to point out during the review today. But this was episode 39 in the Craft Fair Booth Review series. Mika, thank you so much for the fantastic photos. I really enjoyed your booth. And again, I just want to give you a huge kudos for how far you've come in such a short time with your business. Guys, please give Mika a like, a follow on social media, check out her business, and support one another. Just be sure to support one another and prop each other up. It's so much better to prop each other up than tear people down, so that's what this channel is all about. So if you've enjoyed today's video, please, I hope that you become part of this community. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. It is a tremendous place. Just look in the comments. You can see the positivity and encouragement between everybody. And that really goes a long way, especially for, vendors just kind of starting out. It's great to see people getting encouraged like that. So again, subscribe to the channel if you want to be part of that. It's a great community that's been building here for 2 years now. So thank you all so much for watching, and have yourselves a fantastic day.